Could you survive becoming a space marine? Becoming a space marine doesn't transform a man into a god. It unmakes him. Every legendary Astartes walking the battlefields of the 41st millennium was once a child. A terrified, screaming child strapped to a surgical table while priests carved away everything human. 90% of aspirants die during the transformation process, not in glorious combat, not facing the enemies of mankind with bolter in hand. They drown in their own blood. They scream as their bones split apart and organs rupture inside their chests. And those are the lucky ones. The survivors face something far worse. Picture a boy, maybe 10 years old, maybe 12. He has a name, a family somewhere, dreams that belonged to him before the black ships came. Now he lies on cold metal, restraints cutting into wrists, already rubbed raw from struggling. Surgical lights burn white above him, so bright they bleach the color from everything except the red. There is always red. The chamber stinks of counterseptic and copper, and something else, something that smells like lightning and tastes like fear. Robed figures move around him, apothecaries, servants of the chapter whose faces he cannot see beneath their hoods. Their hands are steady. They have done this thousands of times. They will do it thousands more. To them, he is not a child. He is raw material. He is meat that might become something useful, or meat that will be discarded. The distinction matters only in terms of resource allocation. The first incision opens his chest. He screams. Of course he screams. They all scream. The apothecaries do not react. There is a schedule to keep, quotas to meet. The Imperium requires approximately 1 million space marines to defend humanity across 1 million worlds. To maintain that number against the endless grinding attrition of constant warfare, they must process tens of millions of candidates across 10,000 years. Most of those candidates die exactly like this, on tables, under lights, screaming until their throats tear and their voices become wet, bubbling things that no longer sound human. The boy on the table does not know these statistics. He knows only pain. Pain as they crack his ribs apart. Pain as they graft a second heart beside his original one. Pain as chemicals flood his system that will begin rewriting his genetic code from the inside out. His tears mix with the blood pooling beneath his head. The restraints hold firm. This is not torture. This is not punishment. This is the highest honor the Imperium of man can bestow upon a child. He was chosen. Somewhere in the screaming, in the sawing of bone, and the wet sounds of organs being rearranged, the boy who entered this chamber begins to die. Not physically, not yet, but the person he was, the child with dreams and fears, and a name that mattered, that child is being surgically removed, piece by piece. Something else will wear his face when this is finished. Something that carries his memories like archived data files. Something that might remember loving his mother, but will never feel that love again. The Imperium does not create space marines. It destroys children and builds weapons from the wreckage. The full transformation spans every stage of surgical violation. 19 surgical implantations, psychological conditioning designed to shatter identity and rebuild it according to specification. Combat trials that kill candidates even after successful surgery. Every phase examined, every survival percentage calculated, every horrifying detail documented in the Imperium's cold records. Because understanding what Space Marines sacrifice reveals why they fight so ferociously. They have already lost everything that made them human. The question is not whether you could survive the surgeries. Your body might, given the right genetics. The question is whether you would still exist on the other side, whether the thing that emerges from years of agony and transformation would be you in any meaningful sense, or just a weapon wearing your corpse like a suit of armor. The children who become Space Marines do not choose their fate. They are chosen for it. Their potential identified, their bodies claimed, their identities erased in service to an Imperium that will never thank them, never mourn them, never remember their names. Only the weapons matter, and the weapons serve until they die. The process begins long before the first incision, long before the sterile chill of the apothecarion. It begins with the hunt. Each Space Marine chapter is a predator, and its recruitment worlds are its hunting grounds. The prey is not just any human child. The prey is a specific phenotype of meat, a rare genetic configuration that might, with luck, survive being unmade and rebuilt. The vast, overwhelming majority of humanity is simply unsuitable material, culled from consideration before they even know a choice is being made. The first barrier is age. A candidate must be an adolescent male, typically between 10 and 14 years old, not a day older. The sacred gene seed, the genetic legacy of the Primarchs themselves, cannot bond with a fully developed body. It must hijack the storm of puberty, redirecting the body's own explosive growth into the transhuman metamorphosis. A boy of 16 is already too late. His bones have set, his endocrine system has stabilized, his body would fight the implants as a foreign invasion, and he would die in septic agony. With this single requirement, roughly 93% of any given planetary population is immediately disqualified. The second barrier is genetic. Not every human bloodline is compatible. The gene seed is a jealous and demanding parasite. It requires specific markers, specific ancestral codes that suggest a low probability of rejection. Space Marine chapters are not just armies. They are eugenicists. They maintain vast, secret genealogical records on their recruitment worlds, tracking families across generations. A bloodline that has produced a successful Space Marine before becomes a priceless resource, its children watched from birth. A family whose genetics have proven incompatible may find their sons passed over for centuries, no matter how strong or brave they are. This invisible screen of genetic purity eliminates perhaps half of the remaining candidates. The third barrier is the physical baseline. Compatible genetics are not enough. The body itself must be a superior vessel, a foundation of flesh and bone, strong enough to withstand the coming trauma. Apothecaries and chapter serfs conduct brutal physical screenings. They analyze cardiovascular efficiency, test neurological reflexes, measure bone density. Often, the tests themselves are lethal trials. Aspirants are forced into gladiatorial combat, pitted against savage beasts, or made to endure feats of stamina that would kill a normal man. Those whose bodies falter are discarded. Another third of the pool vanishes here. The fourth and final barrier is the mind. A Space Marine cannot be forged from a boy who is already broken, but he also cannot be made from one who is too compassionate, too empathetic. The ideal candidate possesses a specific psychological profile, a neurological architecture that can survive the coming hypno-indoctrination without shattering into madness. They require controlled aggression, an instinct for violence, and a mind resilient enough to be wiped clean and rewritten. Psychers are almost universally rejected, their minds too vulnerable to the horrors of the warp. The overly fearful, the overly kind, the emotionally unstable, all are deemed unfit. The methods for finding these perfect specimens vary as much as the chapters themselves. The Ultramarines of Macragge conduct their recruitment with a veneer of civilization, using academic and athletic trials that echo the traditions of ancient Terra. But for every Ultramarine, there is a space wolf. On the death world of Fenris, Aspirants are chosen from tribal warriors who have already proven themselves in battle. Youths who have already felt the warmth of a dying enemy's blood on their hands. On the irradiated plains of Baal, the blood angels do not need to hunt. The candidates come to them. Scarred, radiation-burnt children of the wasteland tribes make a pilgrimage across vast, toxic deserts, a journey that kills most of them before they ever reach the chapter's fortress monastery. Merely surviving the walk to the front door is the first test. Some chapters practice the blooding, releasing a pack of aspirants into a jungle filled with carnivorous predators and retrieving only the one who walks out weeks later, alone. Others hold tournaments where boys must kill their own friends to proceed. The Exorcists chapter, shrouded in rumor and terror, reportedly allows demons to possess their candidates, accepting only those few who can cast the entity out through sheer, unadulterated willpower. The mortality rate is catastrophic, but it produces a warrior uniquely resistant to the temptations of chaos. By the time a single boy stands shivering before the doors of the apothecarion, his body bruised and his spirit trembling, he is a statistical miracle. He may be 1 in 10,000 from his generation, the sole survivor of a city's worth of children. He has already endured trials that would have broken nations. He has proven himself exceptional by every metric the Imperium values. And his trials have not yet begun. The transformation is not a single, violent act. It is a slow, methodical dismemberment of the self, conducted over years, across 19 distinct surgical implantations. To attempt all of them at once would instantly kill any candidate, no matter how resilient. The body, this temple of flesh and bone, must be given time to absorb one violation before it can endure the next. Phase 1 begins the moment the aspirant is strapped to the apothecarion's table, and it encompasses the first 5 implants, the ones that rewrite the very foundation of his biology without yet making him appear truly monstrous. First, the secondary heart. The candidate's chest is cracked open, ribs spread by cold steel clamps, and a second, smaller heart is grafted beside his original. This isn't a mere backup. The 2 organs work in concert, a complex, synergistic pump capable of independent operation should one fail. The surgery itself is a brutal ordeal, and it kills roughly 3% of aspirants through tissue rejection or simple surgical shock. Those who survive awaken to a profoundly alien sensation, the disorienting, arrhythmic thrum of 2 hearts beating out of sync in their own chest. The psychological impact of hearing oneself become physiologically inhuman is often as traumatic as the wound itself. It is the first, constant reminder that the body is no longer entirely their own. Next is the ossmodula. A specialized gland is sutured to the pituitary system at the base of the brain. It immediately begins secreting powerful hormones that hijack and accelerate bone growth. The candidate's skeleton will eventually become ceramite-hard, his ribcage fusing into a solid, bulletproof plate of bone. But first, he must endure months of deep, unrelenting agony. It's a pain that never ceases, a grinding ache as his bones thicken, lengthen, and twist into new, more robust shapes. Aspirants often cannot sleep. Their joints swell until movement becomes a searing torment. For approximately 5% of them, their bones grow faster than their flesh can accommodate, leading to catastrophic internal injuries and death. Then comes the biscopea. Implanted deep within the chest, this hormonal gland triggers an explosive development of muscle far beyond any natural human limit. Working in tandem with the ossmodula, it fuels a radical physical transformation. Month by month, the aspirants grow taller, their shoulders broadening, their weight increasing as dense, fibrous muscle packs onto their elongating skeletons. This metamorphosis is voracious. It consumes enormous caloric resources. Candidates are forced to eat constantly, sometimes 10 times a day, just to fuel the fire within. Those whose metabolisms cannot sustain the growth literally waste away, their bodies consuming themselves from the inside out, despite being perpetually fed. The hymastomen is implanted into a major blood vessel, where it begins to rewrite the boy's blood at a genetic level. It dramatically increases the number and oxygen-carrying capacity of his red blood cells. The aspirant's blood becomes noticeably brighter, a more vibrant crimson, almost luminescent. His cardiovascular system is being rebuilt to operate with superhuman efficiency. But the transition is perilous. The process induces severe anemia, and for roughly 2% of candidates, their bodies succumb to blood-related complications, their new blood failing before it can fully establish itself. Finally, the Laraman's organ. This liver-like gland manufactures specialized cells, Laraman cells, which act as hyper-aggressive clotting agents. When a fully augmented Marine is wounded, these cells are released into the bloodstream, rushing to the injury site and forming an instant, powerful scar tissue. They can seal a deep cut in seconds and even close an arterial rupture that would kill an ordinary human in a minute. But to integrate the organ, the candidate's natural clotting factors must be suppressed. This creates a terrifying window of vulnerability, where even a minor scratch can lead to uncontrollable bleeding and death. Throughout Phase 1, the candidates live in a state of perpetual medical crisis. They are prisoners of their own transforming bodies, observed constantly by apothecaries. Blood is drawn daily, their vital signs monitored, while they are forced to continue brutal physical training, their aching bones and tearing muscles pushed to the limit. The psychological strain is immense. Many who survive the surgeries cannot endure the mental anguish of feeling themselves become something else. Suicide rates spike. Some chapters, like the Ultramarines, offer counseling through their chaplains. Others, like the Iron Hands, simply execute any aspirant who shows such weakness. The toll is already mounting. Of those who began, only 82% survive Phase 1, 18% are dead, and 14 implants remain. Candidates who survive the foundational horrors of Phase 1 are granted a brief, agonizing recovery before the next sequence begins. Their bodies have stabilized, but they are no longer the boys they were. They now stand noticeably taller than their former peers, their musculature visibly superhuman, their blood chemistry fundamentally and irrevocably altered. But if they look in a mirror, they can still, just barely, recognize the face of the child they once were. Phase 2 will burn that last vestige of humanity away. It begins with the Catalepsean Node. This implant is grafted directly onto the brain stem, a delicate piece of neurotechnology that will allow the Space Marine to consciously control his sleep cycles. He will be able to rest portions of his brain while remaining awake and combat-capable, operating for weeks without true sleep. The surgery requires drilling through the base of the skull, and the candidate must remain conscious for parts of the procedure. He is paralyzed and strapped down, aware of the vibrations, the sounds of bone being ground away, and the cold, precise intrusion into the seat of his consciousness as apothecaries test the functionality of the implant. The brain-invasive nature of the work means neurological complications are common. Approximately 4% of recipients die from seizures or cerebral hemorrhaging. Next, the preomnor. A predigestive stomach is implanted high in the chest cavity, above the original digestive system. This savage organ allows a Space Marine to consume nearly anything organic for sustenance: tree bark, poisonous fungi, the flesh of alien creatures. The preomnor neutralizes toxins and breaks down indigestible matter. But during its integration, the aspirant's body becomes a war zone. The new organ violently fights his existing digestive tract for dominance and space. Candidates suffer weeks of violent cramps, uncontrollable vomiting, and internal bleeding. Some die from catastrophic ruptures, as their own insides tear themselves apart. Then comes the omophagia, perhaps the most disturbing of all the implants. Sunk deep into the spinal cord, it enables one of the most infamous Space Marine abilities, the power to absorb memories by consuming flesh. The omophagia processes genetic material from eaten tissue, extracting encoded memories and experiences, and transmitting them directly to the recipient's brain. A Marine who consumes an enemy's brain can literally learn what they knew. The psychological whiplash is devastating. An aspirant might suddenly be flooded with the memories of a Xenos creature he just killed, his mind reeling with alien thoughts, desires, and hatreds. For about 2% of candidates, this psychic trauma is too much. Their minds simply shatter. The chest is opened once more for the multi-lung, a third lung that is a marvel of bioengineering. It can process lethally toxic atmospheres and even filter oxygen from water, allowing a Marine to breathe underwater for extended periods. But fitting it requires the entire chest cavity to be significantly restructured. Existing organs are moved, the newly hardened ribcage is reinforced, and new respiratory pathways are carved out. It is among the most invasive procedures, and roughly 3% of candidates die on the table from respiratory failure as their bodies struggle and fail to coordinate 3 separate lungs. The oculobe and the liman's ear follow, transforming the senses. The oculobe involves direct modification of the eyeballs and optic nerves, granting superhuman sight in near-total darkness and the ability to perceive wavelengths beyond the normal human spectrum. The surgery, however, temporarily blinds the candidates. They spend weeks in total darkness while their optical systems are rebuilt from the inside out. Some never see again. The liman's ear grants immunity to motion sickness and the ability to filter specific sounds from a cacophony of noise. But the surgery utterly destroys the candidate's sense of balance for months. Many cannot even stand, let alone walk, spending their recovery in a state of perpetual, nauseating vertigo. By the time Phase 2 concludes, the aspirants have become unambiguously transhuman. They perceive the world through senses no normal person could comprehend. They hear frequencies others cannot, see in conditions that would render a man blind, and process it all with machine-like efficiency. They eat poison, breathe toxins, and sleep without ever being truly vulnerable. They are also profoundly, utterly alone. The gulf between their new reality and the world of baseline humanity has grown into an impassable chasm. The cumulative survival rate now stands at approximately 65%. 1 in every 3 candidates who started this journey is dead, and there are still 8 implants to go. Phase 3 is where the transformation flirts openly with death. The remaining implants are not augmentations so much as violations of biological law, procedures that push the aspirant's body to the very brink of catastrophic failure, and hopefully pull it back. These are the surgeries that directly seize control of the neurological and endocrine systems, forging abilities that strain the very definition of life. It begins with the Susan membrane, perhaps the most intricate and dangerous implant of all. This sheet of specialized tissue will allow a Space Marine to enter suspended animation when suffering wounds that would otherwise be instantly fatal. To install it, the aspirant's skull must be opened completely. He lies paralyzed on the surgical slab, his cranium removed, his living brain exposed to the cold air of the apothecarian. For hours, he is aware of the delicate scrape of tools against the surface of his own consciousness as technicians painstakingly wrap the organ of his identity in this fail-safe membrane. The slightest tremor, the smallest miscalculation, means immediate death or a permanent vegetative state. Roughly 6% of candidates die right there, their minds extinguished on the table. Another 3% survive, but with irreversible neurological damage, their journey ending in a twitching, drooling wreck. Next, the melanochrome is injected. This implant rewrites the aspirant's skin at a cellular level, linking it to radiation sensors and allowing it to automatically adjust pigmentation for protection. It's what gives many chapters their distinctively pale complexion, and what triggers the more dramatic mutations in others, like the coal-black skin and burning red eyes of the salamanders. The process takes months. The candidate's skin erupts in a constant, agonizing itch that feels as if it's coming from inside his own cells. Some are driven to the edge of sanity, clawing at their own flesh until it's raw. A small percentage develop horrific skin conditions as their bodies reject the change, their flesh peeling away in sheets until they die from massive secondary infections. Then, the oolitic kidney. A masterpiece of biofiltering, this modified kidney is grafted alongside the original pair. It will render a space marine nearly immune to all but the most esoteric poisons. But its integration requires the aspirant's existing kidneys to be shut down completely. For days, he lies helpless, hooked up to a clanking, wheezing dialysis machine that keeps him from drowning in his own blood toxins, while the new organ slowly takes over. About 2% of candidates never recover. Their bodies give up, and they die of total renal failure. The neuroglottis is next, a modification of the tongue, palate, and olfactory systems. The surgery is a bloody, disorienting affair, with instruments working deep inside the nasal cavity and mouth. When it's done, the aspirant can track a foe for miles by scent alone, detect poisons by taste, and even identify lies through pheromonal changes. But the price is the loss of all pleasure in eating. Food is no longer savory or sweet. It is merely a stream of cold, clinical data about chemical composition. Finally, the mucranoid implant is activated through a series of chemical injections. This gland allows the skin to exude a waxy, protective substance, granting temporary survival in hard vacuum or extreme temperatures. During the integration, the aspirant's skin becomes a horrifying, oozing mess, peeling and weeping a foul-smelling fluid, as his sweat glands are forcibly evolved. Between these torturous procedures, the psychological assault continues relentlessly. While recovering, still weak and in pain, candidates are locked into hypno-indoctrination helms. Psychic conditioning, subliminal messaging, and direct neural programming are blasted into their minds. Fear is suppressed. Doubt is erased. Empathy is recategorized as a tactical weakness. They have watched their brothers die screaming on the tables next to them. They have felt their own skulls being sawn open. And now, in the quiet moments between the agony, their very personalities are being systematically dismantled and rebuilt into something new, a weapon of pure loyalty, aggression, and obedience. Cumulative survival rate, approximately 49%. More than half of the chosen boys are now dead, and there are still 3 implants to go. The final 3 implants represent the culmination of years of surgical violation, the last steps that transform a transhuman aspirant into a fully functional space marine. The 17th, the Becher's gland, is grafted into the lower jaw and salivary glands. It allows the production and projection of a corrosive, blinding acid, essentially granting the Astartes the ability to spit armor-eating venom. The surgery requires peeling back the flesh of the lower face, leaving the candidate unable to speak or eat normally for weeks. The 18th implant, the progenoid glands, serves a purpose far beyond the individual warrior. 2 of these glands, one in the neck and one in the chest, are the future of the chapter itself. They slowly mature over years, absorbing and storing the genetic information of the Space Marine's own gene seed. Upon the warrior's death, An apothecary can harvest these glands, using their precious contents to create the next generation of aspirants. Every Space Marine is a living vessel, carrying the seeds of his replacements within his own body. The surgery to implant them is relatively minor, but their integration with the body's new, alien chemistry can trigger a final, catastrophic rejection cascade, killing approximately 3% of all remaining recipients. But it is the 19th and final implant that represents the apex of the entire process. This is the Black Carapace. This is the scene of the screaming boy in the thumbnail, his face a mask of pure agony as mechanical drills descend. This is the moment that truly defines Space Marine creation. The Black Carapace is not an organ. It is a layer of hard, black, fibrous material implanted directly beneath the skin of the aspirant's entire torso. The surgery takes between 12 and 20 hours, and the aspirant is conscious for most of it. He is strapped down, often paralyzed from the neck down, while apothecaries and technicians methodically flay open his chest and back. They embed thousands of neural interface points directly into his flesh, wiring them into his central nervous system, drilling into his spine to calibrate the connections. He cannot be unconscious because the technicians must test each connection as it's made. They send jolts of electricity through his body, and the aspirant feels it as pure, white-hot fire spreading through his nerve endings. The screaming is constant. It echoes off the cold metal walls of the operating theater for hours on end. Even the most stoic, pain-hardened candidates eventually break, their cries becoming a raw, inhuman sound of a soul being torn apart. The purpose of this waking nightmare is to allow direct, neural integration with power armor. When a Space Marine dons his sacred warplate, it does not sit on top of his body. It bonds with it. He feels the armor's ceramite hull as his own skin. He moves its mighty servo motors as if they were his own limbs. He perceives the world through its auto-senses as if they were his own eyes. Without the Black Carapace, power armor is a clumsy suit. With it, the armor becomes a second, godlike body. Approximately 5% of candidates die during this procedure. Their hearts give out from the trauma, or they suffer a total neurological collapse. Another 3% survive, but with improperly calibrated interfaces. They are cripples, unable to bond with armor. In merciful chapters, they become chapter serfs. In harsher ones, they are simply executed as failures. For the one who endures, the one whose screams finally subside, the moment he first dons his power armor is the true moment of his birth. The heavy plates lock into place, the neural links engage with a sharp jolt, and for the first time he feels it. He is 8 feet tall. He is encased in adamantium and faith. He can feel the hum of the power pack, the weight of the bolter in his grip, the world through a lens of tactical data and enemy heat signatures. He's no longer human. He is something greater, and something less. Cumulative survival rate, approximately 42%. Less than half of the children chosen for this honor survive to become Space Marines. Surviving the surgeries represents only half the transformation. The body, remade and reinforced, is merely a vessel. The true crucible is the mind, for the psychological conditioning proves equally brutal, and it claims nearly as many aspirants as the implants themselves. Throughout the entire years-long process, candidates undergo continuous hypno-indoctrination. While their bodies heal from the apothecary's knife, neural programming devices are clamped to their skulls, projecting information directly into their recovering minds. In drug-induced fugue states and forced, dreamless sleep, they learn. Chapter history, Imperial doctrine, weapons schematics, and tactical theory are downloaded into their consciousness. But they receive something far darker alongside the data, a systematic and deliberate alteration of their emotional architecture. Space Marines cannot afford the luxury of debilitating fear. They cannot hesitate out of empathy for the enemy. They cannot be swayed by sentiment or broken by psychological torture. To ensure this, the chapter's chaplains oversee a process of psychological annihilation. They call it the unmaking. Candidates are subjected to deliberate, calculated trauma designed to shatter their previous identities. They are placed in psycho-simulators and forced to watch recordings of their families being attacked, their childhood homes burned to the ground. The simulations are fake, but the terror, the rage, and the helplessness are absolutely real. They are forced into lethal combat trials against their fellow aspirants, boys they have trained alongside, bled alongside, for years. They are ordered to execute those who fail, to strike down the friends who can no longer keep pace. They experience simulated torture that lasts for subjective weeks, endless cycles of sensory deprivation, and constant exposure to horrifying, warp-tainted imagery until their minds either break or develop the calluses necessary to endure the 41st millennium. Some chapters have their own unique flavors of this torment. The Space Wolves call it teaching the word, breaking the young warrior's human soul so that something harder, something wilder, can grow in its place. The Dark Angels conduct their conditioning in absolute secrecy. Aspirants emerge with entire weeks missing from their memory, their minds reshaped by rituals they are forbidden to recall. And some candidates do break. Not physically. Their transhuman bodies have already proven they can survive almost anything. But mentally, they collapse into catatonia, their minds retreating to a place the chaplains cannot reach. Or they erupt into uncontrollable psychosis, their engineered aggression unmoored from its programmed control. These failures are not mourned. Their augmented bodies are a resource too valuable to waste. They are mind-wiped and converted into servitors, mindless cyborg thralls who load munitions, clean the fortress monastery, or, in the cruelest irony, are deployed as combat servitors on suicide missions that would waste a functional Space Marine. Those who emerge from the unmaking are not the same people. A boy who entered the Apothecarian as cheerful and compassionate might now be a cold, pragmatic killer. Candidates who were once inseparable friends now look at each other as strangers, their shared experiences filtered through reconstructed neurological frameworks that no longer value companionship. The person who began this journey no longer exists. Only a warrior, programmed for absolute loyalty, unquestioning obedience, and perfectly controlled aggression, remains. This is the true cost of becoming a Space Marine: identity death. A warrior might remember loving his mother, but he no longer feels that love. The memory is just data, a factual record stripped of all emotional resonance. The person who entered conditioning is dead. Something else, something made for war, now walks out wearing their body. And by the chapter's grim calculus, about 12% of those who survived the surgeries will fail this final mental test. A fully implanted, psychologically conditioned aspirant is not yet a Space Marine. They have proven their bodies can accept the violent transformation, and their minds can survive the systematic unmaking. But the chapter has not invested years of agony, oceans of resources, and the sacred legacy of its gene seed to create a biological curiosity. It has created a weapon. Now, that weapon must be tested. The final trials vary dramatically between chapters, but all share a single, brutal purpose: to eliminate any candidate whose augmentations have not integrated perfectly, whose conditioning has left an exploitable flaw, or who simply lacks the raw martial aptitude to justify their own creation. These are not graduation exercises. They are the final, violent stage of the culling. For the space wolves, this is the blooding. The newly transformed aspirants are cast out into the lethal wilderness of Fenris, armed with little more than a knife and their own transhuman bodies. They are expected to survive for months, hunting the planet's monstrous megafauna and navigating its treacherous, ice-choked landscapes. They hunt, and they are hunted in turn. Those who return, clad in the pelts of impossible beasts, have proven themselves true sons of Russ. Those who do not simply become another frozen corpse, their augmented bodies devoured by the world that birthed them. The Ultramarines, by contrast, prefer structured evaluation. Their trials are a grueling series of combat simulations, live-fire tactical assessments, and complex leadership scenarios. Aspirants face down holographic alien hordes, navigate lethal kill zones, and are forced to make command decisions where the wrong choice means the simulated death of their entire squad. The environment is controlled, but the judgment is absolute. For the Blood Angels, the final trial is an internal battle. Aspirants must confront the red thirst, the genetic curse that thrums within their veins, screaming for slaughter. They are placed in combat situations and must prove they can master the insatiable bloodlust, maintaining tactical discipline even as their own gene seed urges them to tear their enemies apart and drink their blood. Those who lose control, even for a moment, are judged unworthy and are put down. And the Dark Angels, their trials are a secret, held within the deepest chambers of the rock. Aspirants go in, only worthy brothers come out. Those who fail are never spoken of again. These trials claim the lives of approximately 10% of all fully transformed candidates. Some die in straightforward combat, their superhuman physiology finally meeting a challenge it cannot overcome. Others reveal the cracks in their conditioning. Under the stress of battle, an aspirant might freeze in catatonic terror or erupt in a berserker rage, becoming a danger to his own brothers. In these moments, a chaplain is never far away, and the final judgment is delivered by a bolt pistol. But the most devastating losses are the most tragic. An aspirant can perform flawlessly, his body a symphony of transhuman power, his mind a fortress of indoctrinated steel. Then, in the heat of his final test, something gives. A flicker of pain in the chest, a sudden shortness of breath. It is a catastrophic gene seed rejection. The 19 disparate organs, forced to work in violent concert for years, finally collapse under operational stress. The secondary heart stutters and fails. The multi-lung floods with hyperoxygenated blood. The aspirant collapses, his body convulsing as the biological miracle within him finally curdles and dies. For those who pass, there is no ceremony. They receive the rank of Scout Marine. They are not yet full battle brothers, but they are now permitted to fight alongside their chapter. They will serve for years, sometimes decades, in the reconnaissance companies, proving their worth on 100 battlefields before they are finally deemed worthy of the final honor, a suit of power armor. The numbers tell the final, brutal story. Of the tiny fraction of boys who even begin this journey, only 37% survive to this point. After the final trials, that number falls again. Now, a mere 33% remain. For every 3 children strapped to the apothecary's table, only 1 will ever become a Space Marine. The other 2 die screaming, go irrevocably mad, or are lobotomized and rebuilt as servitors. And these are the statistics for the successful chapters. For those with corrupted gene seed or dwindling resources, the survival rate plummets into the single digits. The fortress monasteries built upon mountains of forgotten, failed children. A newly minted Space Marine stands at a precipice. Behind him lie years of surgical agony, psychological annihilation, and the death of his former self. Before him, stretch centuries of warfare across the galaxy's most hostile battlefields. The question, could you survive becoming a Space Marine, now evolves. It is no longer about the transformation. It is about the existence that transformation creates, and whether that existence constitutes survival in any meaningful sense. Space Marines are, for all practical purposes, immortal. Their enhanced physiology, their constant cellular regeneration, and their access to arcane Imperial medical technology means they do not age in any conventional way. A Space Marine can, in theory, live for thousands of years. But in practice, almost none do. They die in combat. They are deployed endlessly, thrown into the meat grinder of the 41st millennium until something, an orc war boss's power claw, a tyrannid biocannon, a Necron Gauss flare, finally overwhelms their transhuman resilience. The oldest and most revered Space Marines, chapter masters, and venerable dreadnoughts might see 500 years of service. 1,000 years is the stuff of living legend. The vast majority of Astartes die within their first century of duty, their superhuman bodies finally encountering a weapon they cannot survive, an enemy they cannot defeat, or a mission that demands their ultimate sacrifice. And what fills those centuries? War. Constant, unending war. Space Marines do not retire. They do not take leave. They do not experience peace. Their lives are a brutal, repetitive cycle. They train, they fight, they recover from horrific wounds, and they are sent to fight again. Their psychological conditioning has suppressed the very need for rest, the desire for comfort, the longing for connection that might distract them from their sacred duty. They are utterly alone. They cannot return to their homeworlds as anything other than visiting demigods. Their families, if they even remember them with any clarity, are dust within decades, while they remain physically unchanged. They cannot form relationships with baseline humans. The psychological gulf is simply too vast. Their engineered emotional architecture prevents genuine connection. The only family they have are their battle brothers, a fraternity forged in shared trauma and a mutual incomprehension of the humanity they have all lost. Some chapters try to bridge this chasm. The salamanders actively protect civilian populations and maintain ties with their homeworld's people. The space wolves, famously, retain more of their original personality and emotional range, capable of genuine friendship and even grim humor. But even in these most humanized chapters, every Astartes understands the fundamental divide. They are not what they once were. Others embrace their separation completely. The Iron Hands view flesh as a weakness, systematically replacing their own limbs and organs with cold, superior cybernetics until little biological material remains. The flesh-tearers have largely abandoned the struggle for emotional connection, giving themselves over more and more to the Red Thirst's howling fury. And the Grey Knights represent the most extreme case. Their memories are psychically wiped after every mission, preventing any accumulation of experience, trauma, or relationships that might compromise their ritual purity. The transformation's final cost isn't physical. The body survives, enhanced beyond recognition. It isn't even psychological. The conditioned mind functions exactly as it was designed to. The true cost is existential. The person who began the process no longer exists. What remains is a living weapon, an asset in human form, programmed for absolute loyalty to an Imperium that views them as sacred but ultimately expendable resources, all destined to die in service to an emperor they will never meet. So, could you survive becoming a Space Marine? Your body might, given the right genetic lottery and sufficient medical intervention. Your mind might, given thorough enough hypno-conditioning. But you, the consciousness hearing these words, with your unique fears and hopes and loves and connections, would not survive. You would die on that operating table, replaced by something else that wears your face, something that carries your memories like archived data files, that recognizes your former family members without feeling attachment, and serves eternally in wars that will never, ever end. The screaming figure in surgical restraints, cables drilling into skull, tears streaming, blood mixing with machine oil, represents humanity's final, desperate answer to extinction. In a galaxy of horrors beyond comprehension, where demons pour from dimensional rifts and alien swarms consume entire worlds, the Imperium's response is to transform its own children into monsters capable of fighting back. Every Space Marine chapter displays its ancient heroes with solemn reverence. Towering statues of legendary warriors, sacred reliquaries containing the gene seed of fallen champions, honor rolls listing thousands of years of glorious service. But rarely do they commemorate the aspirants who died in transformation. The failures, the broken, the children whose bodies rejected the Emperor's gifts and paid for it with screaming deaths on operating tables, these are forgotten. Their sacrifice is acknowledged only in abstract statistics, their loss absorbed into the vast, grinding machinery of Astartes' creation without individual recognition. And perhaps that is the most honest truth of all. The transformation process is fundamentally industrial. Children enter one end as raw material. Weapons emerge from the other. The wastage is calculated, accepted, and built into the system. A chapter that requires 100 new Space Marines per century might process 300 candidates, knowing full well that 200 will die before ever seeing a battlefield. The Imperium does not mourn expended resources. It simply acquires more. Yet each of those cold statistics represents a specific child, a boy who dreamed of glory, who might have been dragged screaming from his home, or might have walked willingly to the apothecarion, who experienced every single moment of agony during his unmaking, before his body failed or his mind finally broke. Children whose names are unremembered, whose deaths are recorded only as adjustment factors in gene seed viability reports, their final screams echoing only in the sterile chrome of a forgotten operating theater. The surviving Space Marines are not monsters. They are what remains after monstrousness has been applied. Post-human entities, shaped by unimaginable suffering into forms capable of withstanding the galaxy's horrors. They possess a brotherhood, forged in a shared trauma that baseline humans can never understand. They experience a clarity of purpose that ordinary existence can never provide. They know exactly what they are, what they cost, and what they are for. Could you survive becoming a Space Marine? The question itself reveals a fundamental misunderstanding. You cannot survive the process because the process is designed to destroy you and build something else from the wreckage. The better question might be, would the weapon that emerged from your body serve the Emperor well? Would your genetic material produce a warrior worthy of the sacrifice? The Adeptus Astartes are humanity's greatest defenders and its most profound victims. Created through a process that would constitute war crimes in any civilized society, maintained through an infrastructure of child harvesting and systematic identity destruction, they represent both humanity's best hope and its darkest compromise. The Imperium survives because 10-year-old boys are strapped to tables and screamed into transhuman killers. Every Space Marine on every battlefield carries this legacy. The Golden Champions, defending humanity's last strongholds, were once terrified children whose humanity was surgically removed. The legendary heroes, whose names inspire billions, began their journeys, screaming under surgical lights, tears mixing with blood, experiencing a pain beyond description while their very bodies were unmade and rebuilt. This is the grimdark truth at the heart of the 41st millennium. Survival comes only through sacrifice, and the greatest sacrifices are demanded from those who are given no choice. The children transformed into Space Marines don't choose their fate. They are chosen for it. Their potential identified, their bodies claimed, their identities erased in service to an Imperium that will never thank them. Could you survive becoming a Space Marine? The question is irrelevant. The Imperium does not care if you survive, only if a weapon emerges from the process, and the weapons serve until they die.